First things first, I'm Sarah Kustak filling in for Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer. Cris Carter, that's Nick Wright. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
You guys
Thank
good?
you for helping us out so much this week, Sarah.
Hey, I appreciate it.
You're on the show as many days this week as Cris and I. All 5 days.
I didn't do any heavy lifting. I was just riding coattails.
That's not true at all. Thank you so much, Sarah.
I love it. Update on Nick Wright's hair. We're getting a little more of a comb over. He's got a little part coming.
Well, a comb over implies like I'm bald in the middle. It's not a comb over.
People don't know, so we got to keep them confused. But it looks great.
Someone on your Instagram Live said it looked tremendous.
Oh. Thank you very much.
There's a little less volume.
Okay. Big show today.
We're amping up the volume. Big show today, that is right. The Nets might be rethinking Kyrie. The Lakers have a new challenge after trading for AD, but we start with Zion Williamson. Not surprisingly, he was the first pick in the NBA draft last night. The freshman phenom out of Duke is heading to New Orleans. He's been the presumptive #1 overall pick for months, but he was still emotional after his name was called.
I don't even seem real that I just shook his hand. I dreamed about this since I was 4. And for it to actually happen, I just thank God for it.
Look, this is not somebody who's supposed to be the savior of this franchise. That's not what this is. This is a 19-year-old kid who's going to spend this year learning how to play winning NBA basketball. And everything that we're doing from now until the end of our time here as a franchise is going to be about long-term sustainable success. This is Jrue Holiday's team. Zion is going to be part of learning how to win at a really high level. And at some point, if there's a time that the baton gets passed in terms of who's expected to carry us to win games, it will.
See, what was your reaction to David Griffin's comments?
I think we were all very, very relieved. It's something we talked about yesterday as far as the expectations on Zion. But we know in pro sports, man, you got to get lucky. You got to get lucky, get with the right team, have the right coach, to have the right style, have the right mentality to be able to develop your skills. And I love the fact that they removed that burden from him. You will never hear a first-round pick people say what David Griffin said to be able to clear that up. Man, this is Jrue Holiday's team. That was great. Zion should be relieved. He should be relieved that they did win the lottery, and they're going to be able to put a plan in place, sustainable success. That's the difference between the great players and the good players. That was one thing, Nick, when we got together, he would question me and say, Cris, man, what do you think, is the difference? I said, Nick, how long can you keep your prime, keep it open, and stay to be a dominant player?
Once you achieve your full ability, how long can you stay there? How high up the mountain do you get? And how long can you stay up there? When you're talking about, when I like to rank players, we're talking about how good was somebody. It's one, like Tracy McGrady is just as a for instance. His peak was super high, but he couldn't stay there that long. And so how quickly can you get to your peak and how long can you stay there?
And I really believe in institutional stability. I believe in structure. I believe in general managers. I believe in coaches. I've seen so many talented players not be able to get in the right type of system that would highlight their ability. I've been seeing so many really, really talented players be with the wrong coach who didn't say the right types of things. And I think that Zion, being the first pick, and the Pelicans, them clearing the deck, trading Anthony Davis beforehand, so that's not something that he has to deal with. And then unrealistic expectations. Zion wasn't even the leader on Duke's basketball team. Correct. Now we're going to take him into an NBA locker room full of grown men, a lot of them having guaranteed money, and then he's supposed to lead them? No, I like the way that they got off to the start from the time they won the lottery. They didn't even announce that they were going to pick him. And then how they have proceeded since then and the talent that they're putting around him, I'm very, very comfortable with one of the most talented guys we have coming into the NBA that, yes, he will be the star that everyone's projected him to be.
David Griffin did get one thing wrong, though, in his press conference. Zion's not 19. Don't turn 19 for a couple more weeks. He's only 18 years old. He is the youngest, the first player ever drafted who was born in the 2000s. R.J. Barrett also, but R.J. Barrett turned 19 last week. Zion's a few weeks younger than him. But juxtapose this to the previous guy who had this type of hype, not necessarily because of his play, but because of his dad and his personality when he was drafted. And that's Lonzo. And what was said about Lonzo by the person running the Lakers right after he was drafted? He's going to have a banner. He's going to be the next great point guard in Laker history.
He tried to do what Jerry West did to a veteran Shaq.
Exactly right. 100%. With Jerry West, when he was recruiting Shaq, who had already been to the NBA Finals, who was already a league MVP candidate, that's what was placed on Lonzo's shoulders immediately. Zion is 3 times the player Lonzo is, more accomplished in college, and yet you're still saying, no, this is not his team. This is Drew Holiday's team. We will eventually build towards that. And even just compare it to the situation Ja Morant walks into in Memphis. And I'm very optimistic about Ja. And I don't think they did the wrong thing, but they trade away Mike Conley. They make him the face of the team that everything's going to run through. Zion, the Pelicans next year aren't going to be a playoff team. But Drew Holiday, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson. At center, either Jahlil Okafor or the guy they drafted at 8, Jackson Hayes. You have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they took at 17. Josh Hart, E'Twaun Moore coming off the bench. With $30 million in cap space, you have a real team. And so he's not going to be in a position so many number 1 overall picks are. LeBron, the most hyped prospect ever, going into a Cavs team in 2003, that their best player is Ricky Davis, that Paul Silas is the coach, and they don't really have a way to get where they need to. So Zion handled it beautifully. I thought the emotion was touching for a guy who knew this was coming. For him to be, I mean, he wasn't just tears in his eyes. The tears were falling from his face, and to see that, and to see the way he handled it, and the way the Pelicans are handling it, it would appear. Not even renews, just gives you more optimism no matter how optimistic you are.
Griffin says it's Drew Holiday's team. He's in his 11th year in the NBA, coming off of a career year, 7th in New Orleans. But see, is there a distinction between being someone's team and being the face of the franchise?
Well, I think that they're in a process. I think that even with the Bensons, as far as them resetting, recalibrating everything, when they hired David Griffin, that it's going to be a process, because trying to sell seats and trying to market the team is totally different than who's going to lead the team. And in the fourth quarter, with 8 minutes to go, who's going to run the offense and who's going to get buckets for me? So I believe that they'll go about those things in the right way. It's really important that Zion is doing all the right things. I don't believe that they're going to have him over-marketing him. I believe he's in enough market. He might have wanted to be in New York, but he don't know what he was asking for. I think he's going to be far more comfortable, and I believe they'll do a good job as far as him being one of the faces of the franchise. I think David Griffin did a good job saying, now, if one day that the torch needs to be passed, I believe that's on and off the court, that they'll make sure that that happens at the right time.
Well, and the big move right before the draft was a move New Orleans made with that 4th pick, trading back, getting 8, 17, and 35, getting multiple bites at the apple. But people should understand, I believe if New Orleans had wanted to overpay, they could have moved up to 3. I believe New Orleans could have potentially gotten a deal done with the Knicks, who had worked out Darius Garland, who had looked at players other than R.J. Barrett. If you wanted to try to microwave this thing, put Zion and R.J., have that be the marketing campaign, the 2 Duke guys, have them be the face of the franchise together. Instead, David Griffin, again, I think, does the smart thing. You get 2 first-round picks for that 4th pick because you weren't in love with somebody there. You get off the contract of Solomon Hill, so you have more flexibility this summer if someone wants to come play with these guys. I just have tremendous faith in the people running the Pelicans, and I also think David Griffin made the point of Alvin Gentry connecting with Zion's family because of the connection with the Carolinas, all those things. But on the court, I think Alvin Gentry's style fits Zion really well. I think this is, if you're a basketball fan, he's in a great place for us to see how great he truly can become.
Yeah, and keep your eyes on the number 8 pick in Jackson Hayes.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. You're talking about he grew 11 inches when he was in high school. He wasn't even a regular starter at Cincinnati Moeller there, goes to Texas. Only averaged 5 shots a game. But as a rim runner, you want to look at another guy, Tyson Chandler. Yeah. If he reaches his potential, that's the kind of player he can be. Lobs to him, great on the defensive end. So I think Griff did a tremendous job in his first draft.
I had a former NBA player tell me last night, Jackson Hayes has bigger hands than Dr. J or Kawhi Leonard, that he'll walk into the NBA with the biggest hands in the league, which obviously could help a lot on catching those lobs.
You know what that means, though?
Well, yeah, wears big gloves, Sid.
Yeah.
Gotcha, no problem.
Moving on to the Knicks, they selected Duke guard RJ Barrett, 3rd overall. And still unclear how the Knicks will spend the rest of their summer adding players, but it was clear RJ is thrilled to head to New York.
What do I say? Like, I'm so overwhelmed, humbled, and just honored and very thankful, that the Knicks took the chance with me, that they believed in me, and I'm so happy to be a Knick, and I can't wait to play in Madison Square Garden.
We have an opportunity to continue to build this team this summer, and we'll see where the summer takes us. But again, we're very comfortable in building the way we've talked about from the very beginning since Steve Mills brought me here on board to join him. We want to build through the draft. We want to develop young players and be opportunistic in free agency, and we'll see how opportunistic we happen to be this summer.
You're all set.
Thank you. Yo, I'm a Knick. What?
That's great. But Nick, is the Knicks' summer a failure if drafting RJ Barrett is all that they do?
Listen, I like Scott Perry and I have a ton of respect for Steve Mills, and I think they are doing things the smart way in New York. But yes, you don't trade away Kristaps Porzingis because you want to draft RJ Barrett. You trade away Kristaps Porzingis, you open up all this cap space. You do all of that with, we're going to get a blue chip prospect in this year's draft because we're going to have one of, and they ended up having the worst record in basketball. We are fine with that. But we are going to then try to put this rebuild into supersonic mode by drafting a guy who I guess was drafted by the Supersonics, or by signing a guy in Kevin Durant. I mean, and now it doesn't have to be KD. It could be Kawhi, and given KD's injury, Kawhi actually might be the better option. But the Knicks have a very clear plan. And if that plan ends up being derailed because Kevin Durant came back to play too early, because Kevin Durant, sports-wise, tragically shredded his Achilles tendon, it won't be their fault, but it will still be a failure. Like, not all failures do you have to blame someone for. It's not always someone screwed up. Sometimes you just get incredibly unlucky. But the plan is you get a guy at number 3, you sign one of the very best players in the world. Ideally, someone else comes with that guy, but that part doesn't have to happen. But if the Knicks walk out of this offseason without one of the very top free agents, KD at the top of the list, along with Kawhi, and then you could argue Kyrie and Kimba, if they go 0 for 4 on those, then I think the Knicks would feel like, even if they don't blame themselves for it, this summer that we have built for a few years ended up going as poorly as we could have imagined.
This is tough for the Knicks, and we talked a lot yesterday and the last week about Danny Ainge and the inability to get deals done. That's what pro sports is about. Now, you can prognosticate, you can guess, but it's about who gets the deals done, who end up landing the player. Last year, everyone was talking about where LeBron's going to go. The Lakers got it done, regardless of what the chaos, magic, whoever you want to give credit for. That's where LeBron wanted to. They end up landing LeBron James. And this was the summer that they were going to land at least Kevin Durant and another superstar. And RJ, it's not his fault. He wants to be a Knick. Part of the reason why you got to trade Kristaps is because he didn't want to be a Knick long term, regardless of what people say. There's enough credible evidence that he didn't want to be it. So that's refreshing. But you don't put that young player at Madison Square Garden unless you have at least one of the other premier scorers that we have. Because I believe RJ can be an elite scorer in the NBA. He did something that we haven't seen in college basketball done in the last 25 years. 22, 7, and 4. 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. Have not seen it done. Knicks always, hey, man, he's one of something. This dude is one of one. And just imagine what he would learn over the next 3 or 4 years if Kevin Durant was there, if Kyrie Irving was there. Imagine him as your 3rd or 4th best offensive option, because you can say what you want. You might not like his game, but he came to play every night at Duke. Nick mentioned he just turned 19 last week. He's an accomplished scorer. He can create his own shot. He's got a shot that's not broken. He's got to be able to shoot higher percentage from the free throw line. And, of course, he's got to get better for shooting the 3 ball. But as far as a college basketball player and transitioning, I believe he's going to be able to score the basketball well in the NBA now.
And with that all-around game, the comp, and it's not just because he's a lefty, the best-case scenario comp's obviously James Harden. It's what people have talked about with him. Durant obviously played with Harden. This was the guy that was the #1 recruit in his draft class, a higher recruit than Zion, a guy that 8 months ago everyone thought would be the #1 pick of the draft. So the Knicks, I know Knicks fans were all devastated that they didn't get the 14% chance of getting the #1 overall pick. RJ Barrett is excellent value at #3, and I think will be a very good pro. But the plan was not to draft. The plan was not what Memphis is right now. Tear it all down, build around your blue chip lottery pick, and do it slowly. The plan is get a superstar. And no matter what, if they get Durant, the plan's going to be delayed by a year, but you can deal with that because you haven't mortgaged your future picks. You could potentially be in this position again, and that would be fine. But if you walk out of this, if come July 8th, you're like, are we going to have to offer a max contract to Nikola Vucevic so we don't end up striking out? Then that's a disaster. And again, I want to make this clear. I think the Knicks made all the smart moves. You move off Kristaps because, as Cris is saying, he didn't want to be there, but also it allowed you to move off bad contracts. It allowed you to open up cap space, and you get picks from the Mavericks moving forward for extra artillery if you want to make a trade years down the line. But you have to land one of these guys, or else this is going to feel like, even if it's not, it's going to feel like for Knicks fans, same old. Just like we were in it for LeBron, just like we were in it for these guys, we aren't able to land the star that we need.
Maybe not for Knicks fans, but see, what do you think the Knicks organization perception of where they're at would be if Kevin Durant is the only one that they do sign? As Knicks say, it's delayed, but you're still getting your top guy. How do you think they would view the way this offseason then had gone?
The Knicks are willing to have patience. They kind of discussed with me, you remember Prop 48, when the kid didn't have the right entrance scores, he couldn't play typically for a year, or sometimes in January he was able to play? That's the way they look at it. They'll put him on the shelf till he's ready to play. They're willing to be patient with him. They believe in Kevin Durant. And if they don't sign 2 superstars, their situation would be to sign Kevin Durant and then look for some players like Marcus Morris, other guys that won't eat up all that cap space, veterans who've worked hard, who the Knicks, they have a list of guys in that category that they have a lot of respect for and want to bring them in to teach these younger players how to play.
And guys that in a year, along with whatever the Knicks lottery pick would be next season, plus some of those Mavericks picks, you could flip for whatever I'm sure there's going to be a superstar that says, I don't want to be here anymore somewhere around the league. We're on 3 straight years of that happening, and you do it that way. If the Knicks get Kevin Durant, this entire process was worth it. Even waiting here. If all they get is Kevin Durant, this entire process was worth it. I do not believe Kevin Durant's going to come back and all of a sudden be a poor man's Rudy Gay. I think Kevin Durant's going to come back and be one of the 5 best players in basketball. Is he going to be the apex version of himself we saw before? We don't know that. But 85% of Kevin Durant is better than 98% of everyone in the NBA.
And Kevin Durant will be motivated like no other time in his career.
After dominating group play at the FIFA Women's World Cup, the United States faces Spain in the round of 16. Coverage begins Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern on FS1, or watch it live on the Fox Sports app. Time for us to go viral. Shaquille O'Neal's son and UCLA forward Sharif O'Neal is back on the court and playing in the Drew League. Nice to see him back out there after a health scare last year. And he posted this photo with his brother Shakir with the caption, "When y'all both missing free throws and someone in the crowd starts saying, 'just like your daddy,' he made them when they counted, though." Hashtag 4 rings, hashtag 3 finals MVPs. And, of course, this had Instagram in an uproar. D. Wade and LeBron both commented with laughing emojis. And, of course, Shaq chimed in saying, "And tell him your daddy the best to ever do it. But then again, you ain't got to say nothing. They already know." And Shaq, of course, also said, "Your daddy got 4 of them. Thanks."
I'm so happy for the O'Neal family and that this young man recovered from. He had very significant surgery. Shaq was with us earlier this week, told the story about how nervous the young man was going into surgery. But this is awesome. He's killing it, man.
Yeah, but the haters going to show up. I remember one time I was coaching my son in high school football, and one of the defensive backs was yelling at Durant. He's playing professionally in the CFL still, and he was yelling, "Oh, you're no good, just like your dad." I was like, "You don't know me?" He's like, "No, I don't know you." I said, "Ask your mama." She know about me.
Are we about to see just a whole generation of NBA guys that are just kids of former NBA guys?
No, Nick, it don't work out that way. No, you think these professional athletes just start having kids? We've been having kids for a long time. I think the ratio will stay exactly the same.
Wade's son, LeBron's son.
Yeah, but when you have 10, you throw up the ratio.
Gosh,
I mean, goodness gracious.
Oh, now it's time for your AT&T wake-up call. Zion Williamson,
let's just keep it at
was selected first overall by the Pelicans. David Griffin was clear, saying he's not the savior of the franchise, but Nick, will Zion be the Pelicans' savior?
Well, savior's a tough word. He's going to win Rookie of the Year. He's going to be a superstar in this league, and eventually he will be the best player on a championship contender. And because the Pelicans have David Griffin running the show, I don't think Zion's going to have to go elsewhere to be the best player on a championship contender. I think they will build it the right way there. But in the meantime, I don't look at the Pelicans as a team that necessarily needs saving. They need leadership. They have that with Griffin, and now they have the star in Zion Williamson.
Man, if we looked at the top 10 players in the NBA right now, and let's look at when they got started like Zion, and I think that we feel very, very comfortable with the position that the Pelicans have put him in, where he doesn't have to lead. He doesn't have to go out and get 20 a night. We believe his overall development is better than some of the cases. Giannis didn't have any help around him, right? LeBron didn't have any help. Kawhi had a bunch of institutional support, and I believe that Zion can be in a situation, not the winning part yet, but all the other things that are very, very important to your development.
Moving on to the number 2 pick, Ja Morant was selected second overall by the Grizzlies. He will be the man in Memphis after they traded Mike Conley. So, what do you expect from Ja as a pro?
Oh, I expect him to be. This year's college draft, he was the best passer. We know that he's an elite scorer, but he was the best passer. Passes the ball with left or his right hand. His ability to be able to finish as a small guy at the hoop. His jump shot will only get better. Shot 82% from the free throw line, so we know he can shoot the basketball. I expect him to do exciting. Listen now, he could be Rookie of the Year, Nick, because of the amount of minutes that he's going to play, and his scoring average is going to be very high.
And his game translates to the modern NBA as well as any player taken in this draft. He's not only an excellent three-point shooter on the right side of the court, but he's an excellent deep three-point shooter, a la Damian Lillard, a la Steph, as far as not being afraid to take him from 4 or 5 feet beyond the arc. He's obviously an explosive athlete. I think 4 out of 10 NBA drafts, he would have been the number 1 overall pick.
And he's one of the best stories for high school kids out there. If you don't have any stars next year, you don't have a ranking, you don't have a bunch of D1 scholarships, just stick at it. Stick to the grind. Keep working at it. Man, if you have someone like his dad in your corner working you out, man, the
sky's the limit.
That's what I was going to say.
I know. I got you, bro.
To the number 4 overall pick, the Hawks selected DeAndre Hunter after trading up from this pick from New Orleans. Before the Pelicans sent this pick to Atlanta, the Celtics reportedly called but failed to acquire the pick.
Oh,
Nick,
shocking.
Your reaction to this?
So wait, you're trying to tell this report can't be right. You're trying to tell me Danny Ainge was going after an elite asset and just couldn't quite close the deal? I never heard such a thing. Now, to Danny Ainge's credit, he did pull off a trade in this year's draft. I don't totally understand it. He traded the 24th pick of this year's draft plus Aaron Baines for next year's Bucks pick, which is going to be 28th or worse. So maybe, I guess it's to free up cap space so the Celtics can do what? Offer a max contract? You know who would fit great for Boston? They should offer a max contract to? Kyrie Irving or Al Horford. Either one of those guys could really get him over the top. So no, I'm Boston, of course. They had their name in it. Oh, we really wanted to move up to 4, just couldn't get it done. Color me not shocked at all.
What was one of the problems we talked about yesterday? They got too many swing guys. They got too many forwards. They didn't have enough minutes, right? Gordon Hayward, Jaylen Brown trying to play Tatum, the best of them. They're going to bring another swing guy in?
I think they probably, because of that, though, the reason they want to move up is so you don't have as many players to pick. It's only one guy instead of multiple picks, but they were never going to move up, man. You can't get what they offer. Daniel Theis in the 17th pick.
Yeah, he wouldn't have solved any of their problems.
Nah, man, come on.
Finally,
Boston.
The Lakers looking to fill out their roster around LeBron, AD, and Kyle Kuzma. According to reports, they have a strong interest in D'Angelo Russell and plan to meet with him face-to-face when free agency begins. So, your thoughts on a Russell-Lakers reunion?
Oh, man, this would be a great finish to an ugly story of a young, immature player. And I believe that, I know he doesn't want to do it this way, but some of those stories that came out, he believed that he wasn't portrayed in the right. And there was some misinformation that was put out about him. I got a chance to know him. He had an outstanding season with Brooklyn. Could he play off the ball with LeBron James? Yes, he could. And if they don't get someone else as from a free agent, would he be your plan B? Yes, absolutely. He can take over in quarters. He can score the basketball. He's a playmaker, an elite passer of the basketball. And I'm just sure, a lot of times I like to look for who's motivated. And I think going back to Los Angeles, being one of a failed top pick there and going back there, understanding how to deal with Laker Nation and everything, I think it could be a great reunion.
If only we had someone on the show right now that maybe watched him play 75 games this year that could give us a scouting report. But we do in Sarah Kustok. So, Sarah, for people that haven't seen D'Angelo Russell, that maybe don't live where we live, don't see him play that often, the Nets weren't on national TV a bunch. D'Angelo Russell this past season, who is going to finish first or second in most improved player balloting. He and Pascal Siakam are the two guys really in the running for that. Tell us who D'Angelo Russell became this season.
Well, I'm going to start by talking about his game because we know he was an all-star, but there was so much development and growth that I saw in the way in which he was able to play point guard, of course, as we know, but off the ball. He's a guy that is savvy. He's crafty. He knows how to work a pick and roll. And I think so many people focused on the scoring effort that he had, the way in which he shot the ball so well from the three. To me, he organized a team. He can push the pace. He can get things going. But his passing vision is elite. The things we say about LeBron of putting it on time, on target, is exactly what Russell can do. And I think more of the questions often came down to, okay, what's his character like? What's his personality like? How is he going to fit in on a team? He was one of the most upstanding individuals, great character. Teammates loved him. He came to work every single day. He was coached hard by Kenny Atkinson, and he embraced that. And he's a guy who has a chip on his shoulder because he has something to prove. He believes that he can be one of the best point guards in the league, as he should, and his talent is unmatched. And I think, or I shouldn't say his talent is unmatched, but his skill set is at a level of which, if he keeps continuing to thrive and be in the right situation, he's got a lot of room to continue improving. More than anything, too, he's got a relationship with LeBron.
Well, he has a relationship with LeBron, and I know we're going to talk about Kyrie in a moment. To me, the Lakers are in a good position in this regard. If Kyrie goes to Brooklyn, I would imagine then D'Angelo Russell is available for whomever wants to sign him and then go get him. And if D'Angelo Russell doesn't become available, it's most likely because Kyrie didn't go to Brooklyn. And if he's not going to Brooklyn, maybe it's the Knicks. But I would think it's really because he actually ends up choosing to go to the Lakers. What would this mean for the Lakers? Would I rather have Kyrie? Yes. Would I rather have Kemba? Yes. But if you decide you want to spend essentially all of your free agency dollars on one player, after Kyrie, Kemba, and Kawhi Leonard, D'Angelo Russell does make the most sense. It's the position of need. He adds shooting. Last year he was 37% from three on 8 threes a game. We have seen,
wow.
So a high volume.
Yeah.
And historically, guys that play with LeBron, their three-point percentage goes up 1 or 2 points just because he's going to get you
uncontested,
and he's going to hit you right in your shooting pocket. So if you can shoot 7+ threes a game at 37 or above, that is incredibly valuable. And if you are talking about, okay, could this top four be a championship top four? LeBron, Anthony Davis, D'Angelo Russell, Kyle Kuzma, the answer to me is yes. And you know I love the age profile, let's look at this a few years out. LeBron's 34. In 3 years, I think LeBron's still going to be playing, but not at this level. Then Anthony Davis is going to be in the absolute middle of his prime. He'll be 29. D'Angelo Russell's 23. He'd be 26. So you have the good kind of rollover age as far as not overlapping. What happened in Miami was all three guys were the same age. And so when LeBron was still in his prime, D. Wade unfortunately was falling off a bit. Chris Bosh was falling off a bit. This makes a little more sense. So I don't think this would be the Lakers' first option in free agency, but I think it'd be a good option. And the guy that gave up on him is gone. The guy that kicked him on the way out the door, Magic Johnson, is gone. And people should know, they traded D'Angelo Russell not just because he was immaturity and whatever it was. They needed someone to take the Mozgov contract in order to open up a spot for LeBron James. D'Angelo Russell was the carrot to get the bad contract off the books, so they could bring him back. And I think D'Angelo Russell loved L.A. and has a relationship with LeBron. If the Nets don't offer him the full restricted max, I think L.A. would probably be his first option.
Yeah. And he's a guy, too, that I think the thing Magic pointed to was being a leader. I think you often see with young players the maturity it brings.
Yes.
Getting
Drafted at 19 years old. Who's
a
a leader at 19?
All right, let's move on to the other point guard. We're talking about Kyrie Irving. He seems to have his bags packed out of Boston. The question is where he goes next. While Brooklyn seemed to be the favorite, reports are the Nets are questioning signing Kyrie if they can't also land Kevin Durant. Nick, are teams right to have doubts about Kyrie after his failures in Boston?
I think it's totally fair to have doubts, but I think it's unfair to act like a guy can't learn from failure. So I do think there's an element of why would it be different in Brooklyn than it was in Boston? But the reason it would be different would be if Kyrie's different. If Kyrie learns the way I tried to coach up, or however you want to put it, young players didn't work. My approach of just wait till the playoffs, man. That sounds great until you don't deliver in the playoffs, and maybe I needed to come to work every day with more of a today is the day that matters mentality. So I understand the skepticism and the nervous anxiety about that, but I don't think it's fair to say for a 27-year-old, 26-year-old Kyrie Irving, he is who he is. He's never going to change. I think guys evolve as they get older. LeBron James at 27 years old, while it was nobody questioned how good of a player he was already won a couple MVPs, was an immature guy. The stories about LeBron off the court were not incredibly flattering about how he treated people, about those things. He grew. So I think guys in their late 20s can grow. I don't think we should shut the door on that for Kyrie.
I think also it's a totally different situation. He's in an arranged marriage where he got traded from Cleveland, forced his way out, but it was arranged. Couldn't pick where he wanted to go. Compared to, man, he's been able to analyze the coaching, the style of play, the facilities, where he's going to be played, how he's going to be scrutinized, who's going to be there, who's going to be on the team. He's picking his team. So he should be better in this situation, knowing himself. Nick, one of my pet peeves is that people are not self-aware. And Kyrie Irving, he would be naive to go into this situation not learning from the situation that he had there in Boston. But around the league, though, I know there's other teams that they are concerned about Kyrie and what happened in the Boston locker room. His inability, forget on the basketball court, his inability with a young group, because what team is not young? I mean, 90% of the teams are young and in transition and need someone like Kyrie, if he has that experience, to provide stable leadership. I think Kyrie Irving's biggest problem, it's not in his head, is how diligent is he going to be as far as taking care of his body and playing basketball? You can't be waiting until the playoffs. That's like the old NFL where guys used to, come to training camp to get in shape. You can't do that anymore. You have to take care of your moneymaker. It's your body. And if he makes that a number one priority, whichever team lands him, which I think is going to be the Nets, they will have a different Kyrie.
And listen, I want to be careful here, but I want to be fully transparent with the audience. There are concerns around the league about Kyrie Irving when he's not within the facility, not too dissimilar to some concerns that surrounded James Harden years ago about how much partying is this guy doing? How will his body age with a 4+ year contract?
Yeah, we just seen the new Harden. Harden, when he dropped 62
right,
and was in the weight room that night with his rocket shorts on, like, that's a different Harden. That's a maturing James Harden.
But when he first got to Houston, I mean, they famously, literally retired his jersey at one of Houston's strip clubs because he was there every night, and we
have some eyewitnesses.
Right. Okay. All right. We don't have to talk about that. And so and I'm not saying that's what Kyrie's doing. I'm not saying Kyrie Irving's in the strip clubs all the time. I'm just saying you talk to guys around the league, and I feel like. I know I've heard from 2 teams that say, listen, yes, we'd be better with Kyrie, but he's not our top choice. And he's such a talented player. You would think he should be a top choice. I know the Lakers would love to have him because he'd be back with LeBron and they know that works. I don't believe the Nets, if they have the option to sign Kyrie Irving, are going to turn it down. Maybe there's some anxiety there. But there are not here. KD, Kawhi, Kyrie, Kimba. Clay's not coming available. There's your top tier. Then it's Butler, Tobias Harris, Chris Middleton, D'Angelo Russell. Now we're to the third tier after that of Boogie, Vucevic, Julius Randle. There are Brooklyn, New York, Sacramento, Philly, Clippers, Dallas, Indiana, Boston, Pelicans, and maybe the Lakers. That's 10 teams with max cap space. There's going to be a lot of people at the end of this musical chairs that don't have a seat and don't have a free agent. If you have an opportunity to sign one of those top-tier guys and you're like, I don't know if I want to, I don't buy that. I think Brooklyn would sign up for Kyrie Irving and hope he's matured, but it wouldn't be risk-free. I look at Kawhi as risk-free as something can be. I don't look at Kyrie the same way.
And you can't forget that Kyrie's free agency is affected by Kevin Durant's injury, because I do believe that they wanted to play together. I don't believe there was another pair out there that wanted to play together more so than them. I believe it was part of the plan. I also do believe the courtship with Brooklyn and Kyrie since he was a kid, him and his dad, that's real, and that's muddied the waters. So Kyrie is the wild card as far as all the free agents.
Welcome back to First Things First. Former NFL head coach Eric Mangini joins the show. Coach, thanks for being here again.
Coach, how are you?
I am fantastic.
Good to see you, my friend.
It's always so good to see Nick with his new look.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
He's going to get a part in a couple of weeks, Coach.
Okay, let's talk football.
Let's talk football.
Thank
now,
you,
Coach, the Rams.
Sean McVay's got a little thing at the top. See that
Rams were just a hair away from winning the Super Bowl last season. And while Sean McVay's offense was a cut above the rest the last 2 years, Pro Football Focus says Sean McVay needs to show evolution in his scheme. So, Coach, how does McVay's scheme need to evolve?
I'm curious what Pro Football Focus is looking at and what area they feel he's been deficient in. And this is a normal progression. As defensive coordinators get time to look at schemes, as people in the division get a chance to really evaluate personnel, and they're playing teams multiple times, there are best practices. And what happens is it's a copycat league, and everybody starts incorporating those things. So you're constantly trying to stay ahead of the curve, but it's challenging. And to Sean's credit, he's Coach of the Year his rookie season. He goes to the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl in his second season. That's pretty good. Now, he's got a whole different set of challenges, as we know the teams that lose in the Super Bowl and struggling with that level of success and understanding how to operate in that world. That's going to be challenging. One thing I do like about their situations, they have a guy named Shane Waldron, who's going to be their quarterback coach and their passing game coordinator, and he's creative. He's going to get more responsibility. I know him from his days in New England. He was a PhD there, a poor, hungry, driven guy, at the start. So he's gone through that program, did some time in college football, has been with Sean at both Washington and now at the Rams. So I like the infusion of his ideas into that system and what that'll bring.
So the challenges McVay and the Rams as a whole are going to face, to me, are twofold, and they're kind of obvious. One is, do you still have Todd Gurley? I mean, you do, but do you still have Todd Gurley? Because he was the key, to me, to everything they did. He was the key to their pre-snap motion. He was their key. So much of their offense was off the defense, being worried about Todd and his threat as a runner and as a pass catcher, and what that opened up over the middle of the field and down the field. And the second one is Jared Goff After that epic Chiefs game, 54-51, national television, everyone saw it. The rest of the year, playoffs included, he threw 7 touchdowns, had 8 picks. 4 of those touchdowns came in one game, and he had a quarterback rating of 74. Something interesting didn't happen this summer and won't happen this summer, and that's Jared Goff getting a contract extension. Carson Wentz, same draft, the pick after him. He got his extension. The Rams have made it clear, no, we got time on this. We have the 4th year of his deal plus his 5th year option. We are going to wait. So the Rams are going to have to decide after this season, do we want to make him the next $30+ million a year quarterback? And so for McVay, it is, to me, figuring out once teams, as you talk about, got more film on this Rams offense, is that why Jared Goff slowed down, his production slowed down? How closely is his production tied to how dangerous Todd Gurley is? And that the subset to that question is, what do we do if Todd Gurley, according to his trainer, his arthritic knee prevents him from being the best all-around running back in football? How much does that hurt our offense? All of those things, to me, are very interesting questions for Sean McVay, who, you're right, first year you take over a team that seemed to have no offensive punch whatsoever. You get them to the playoffs. Second year, you get them to the Super Bowl. How do you make sure you don't take a massive step back this year when you might not be as talented this season as you were last year? Those are all, to me, very real questions.
First, like Coach Mangini, I think we need to acknowledge the success that he's had. This is not the NBA. We see a lot of rookie coaches in the NBA have great success, but the number of things that they have to know are a lot less. I'm not trying to discredit what an NBA coach has to do, but a football coach got to know offense, defense, special team, how to manage the media, managing practices, managing injuries. There's so many more things that they have to be involved with. Sean McVay has been great, not like any other young coach that we've seen. So you know what? Every year what we're going to do with Sean McVay, because we don't believe in his genius ability. We don't believe someone that young could be successful. So we're just going to pick apart his success. Last year, the challenge was how he's going to deal with all these renegades, all these veteran players, all that locker room. Oh, they're going to eat him up and chew him up. He seemed to do all right. Locker room seemed to be pretty good. Didn't seem to have a problem. Came up a little bit short against the team that's dominated pro football the last 20 years. But I am going to challenge him to this, because every coach has got to deal with injuries. But you need more than one pitch. So they are a 3-receiver offense. When Cooper Kupp got hurt, that offense began to look different. When Todd Gurley got hurt, now Todd Gurley is a special running back. So how does Sean McVay create the looks into the line of scrimmage with that run action that Todd Gurley with any other running back? That's something that he's got to do, and only 5 teams in the NFL threw to the tight ends less than Sean McVay did with the Rams. So I'm going to give him a chance to evolve. But that action with Todd Gurley out of a 3-receiver set, him hitting into that line of scrimmage and that play action, that pull, how do I create that if I don't have a Todd Gurley? That's what he's got to be able to figure out. And the tight end for a quarterback is the most friendly guy to be able to throw to. He has the versatility on the line, in the backfield. They have to make their tight ends more of a priority this season.
Yeah, and he got out-coached in the Super Bowl, but he got out-coached by a guy who's coached in the NFL 10 more years longer than Sean McVay's been alive. So in fairness to him, and there's been a lot of people that have been out-coached by Bill Belichick, and his evolution is going to have to continue. And his age, I think, helps him there, because you are open to a lot of different ideas. You are open to a lot of different voices. And I think you'll see some things that are different this season than we've seen in the past. And to me, you have to do that, because the good teams are constantly staying ahead of the film they put on the previous season.
How much more evolution also comes from development with Jared Goff in just where he can take his game to and the comfort between the two of these guys?
Well, Nick made a great point. They decided not to extend him, which to me is good business. I don't think you have to
totally agree.
Extend people just because, you want to make them happy. Like, there's got to be a business component to this, but they're not extending Sean McVay either. And then people have talked about that component as well. He has to grow in addition to the head coach, and they need to grow together. And the film is piling up, and the things that he does poorly and the weaknesses that he has, those are going to come week in and week out. So you try to spend the offseason, you try to spend the OTAs working on what your greatest weakness is. And that takes a lot of strength of character to do that because it's not easy and it's not fun and it's not comfortable.
Jared Goff at the end of the season, in the month of December, you're going to have 4 games. Can you put 2 of those games on his back and he drive you down the field to win the game late? That would be one of the steps you'd like to be able to see with Jared Goff. We always weren't worrying about his body. His body has held up. I believe he'll be even better in this season. I do believe they should sign him to a contract extension because he is the quarterback of the future there with the Rams.
Welcome back to First Things First. Yahoo senior NBA writer Vincent Goodwill joins the show. Vinny, thank you for being back here with us. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Good to see you, man.
Can you leave my presence today without getting my partner stirred up, okay?
Why else am I here?
Okay, I like it.
Good answer.
Sign him to a contract extension.
Let's talk Zion Williamson. He was the first pick in the NBA draft last night. The freshman phenom out of Duke is heading to New Orleans. He's been the presumptive #1 overall pick for months, but he was still emotional after his name was called.
I don't even seem real that I just shook his hand. I dreamed about this since I was 4. And for it to actually happen, I just thank God for it.
Look, this is not somebody who's supposed to be the savior of this franchise. That's not what this is. This is a 19-year-old kid who's going to spend this year learning how to play winning NBA basketball. And everything that we're doing from now until the end of our time here as a franchise is going to be about long-term sustainable success. This is Drew Holiday's team. Zion is going to be part of learning how to win at a really high level. And at some point, if there's a time that the baton gets passed in terms of who's expected to carry us to win games, it will.
Vince, special to see, of course, Zion's reaction, but what was your reaction to David Griffin's comments?
I thought it was measured. And the most important thing, when you take a pick like Zion Williamson, that's the pick that's going to define David Griffin's tenure in New Orleans for however long he's there. And I talk to executives all the time about how much pressure you put on #1 picks, whether they're the Zion type or just random top 10 guys who you're coming in to expect to help a lottery team. And the #1 thing they always talk about is, look, the pedigree of a guy like that. Zion Williamson is not a LeBron James who was the #1 player in his class from the point he was in basically 8th or 9th grade. And you have to deal with that attention for 4 or 5 years. Zion Williamson wasn't even the #1 player out of his high school class. That was R.J. Barrett.
Right, which means he wasn't the #1 recruit on Duke last year. In fact,
he just showed up.
Right, it was R.J. Cam Zion.
He just showed up. So to put all of that on him, and look, this is not a traditional bad franchise. Like a year ago, New Orleans was in the 2nd round of the playoffs, and granted, Anthony Davis was there, and granted, Rajon Rondo and Boogie Cousins that helped them get to a certain point there. But this is not a bare bones, we have no talent, we have no hope situation. You have the same coach. You still have Drew Holiday there. You get some of these young guys from the Lakers there to share into that burden. So why add that onto him when he's 19 years old? I think sometimes we forget these guys are really, really young, and sometimes they don't know how to handle that pressure and attention. Maybe inside, David Griffin says, hey, you're going to have to be the star. You're going to have to elevate your game. But out to the outside world, I think that's a very smart play for him not to do that.
Within the first 30 days when we drafted Randy Moss, I knew he was going to be special. And I had told him privately, I thought by the time I retired, I thought I'd play 4 more years. By the time I retired, I thought he would be the best wide receiver in the game. I told him that. And I said, my goal is not only to get you to that point, but if I get you to that point, then you'll be the highest paid. Now, when I came to Minneapolis and the media asked me, I was measured as far as my comments. He's got a lot of, man, it's a big jump from Marshall. Man, the game moves a lot quicker. How's he going to be on bump and run? But I had flown in a couple DBs down to Florida that Randy had toasted them. I mean, accomplished defensive backs. So we had confidence, but I wasn't going to let that out. So then the first game when he goes off against Tampa Bay, gets 2 touchdowns and everything, people are like, wow, Chris, did you surprise? No. So I think once he starts playing the Pelicans and David Griffin, they'll be like, no, this is what he expected. But the measured words are very, very important because it's about expectations. And they have to be able to manage those expectations to put him in a situation that he can develop. There is no player in the NBA like Zion right now. So they have to try to fit him in to a winning formula. Man, take care of his body. Make sure he plays the right amount of minutes. And I think that, man, he's in such good hands. Man, he is so fortunate that he has an organizational support. I believe in institutional support. That's the way you get to success. It's not just about talent. It's about the supporting cast.
I'm thrilled the Knicks didn't win the lottery. Not because I don't think the Knicks are a good franchise, but because I think the Knicks got this max cap space. Obviously, if Durant hadn't gotten hurt, I thought they were going to be a contender next season. I don't want Zion in that crucible. I wouldn't want him in L.A. with LeBron neither. I want him exactly where he is, where he can have a similar trajectory as Trae Young last year. Trae, we only talked about Trae when he played well. We left him totally alone when he played poorly. We know all about Trae's double 40 and 10 games. We don't know so much about his 3 for 18 games because it's part of the process, but the expectations weren't that Atlanta was all of a sudden going to be contending. Now, New Orleans is a better team set up now than Atlanta was with Trae Young last year. Drew Holiday is a fringe all-star level player. Ingram and Ball, even if they're disappointing number 2 overall picks, they're legitimate NBA rotation guys. They've done things the right way in that regard.
I would say they're legitimate NBA starters.
Yeah.
Like they have proven that they deserve to be starters out there, and they've been through little stuff themselves that's only going to help Zion.
Help Zion. But I mean, when you watch these, when you were talking, I promise I was listening, but I was a little distracted because I was watching these Zion highlights. Man, I've never seen a guy like this.
That's who Randy Moss was.
Right. 100%. You never seen a guy, what is he, almost 6'6", runs a 4.2-ish with a 40-inch vertical. That human being's not supposed to exist. This human being has never existed. Don't tell me I didn't watch Rodney Rogers. No. This guy has never existed. A guy of this build, this explosiveness, these instincts defensively, and as far as the second jump you talk about, the first step, that translates. So it is important for David Griffin to not do what Magic did to Lonzo, which is say you're gonna hang his jersey in the rafters, even though you damn sure better be hanging Zion's jersey in the rafters when it's all said and done, or somebody screwed something up. He left because something bad happened, or he didn't reach even half of his full potential. But I couldn't be more excited to watch this guy, and on a team that I think will be good-ish. I don't think they're a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to win 18 games.
No.
I think there'll be a 35-ish win team in the West and play at a fast pace, and they will allow Zion to do what he does great in the games and work on what he needs to work on in practices, which is if you were on a team trying to win right now, then you can't spend time working on what he's not good at. It's just do what you are good at. It's one of the things that I think's hurt Ben Simmons. Since he's been playing, the Sixers been like, we can win right now. So you can't spend time with him working through things in games because you need him to win right now. That's not going to be the situation with Zion.
So in adding the motor and the disposition and everything we see off the court, but Vince, how do you factor Alvin Gentry into this? Because we've talked so much about David Griffin and the great hands he's in with him in running the show, in the team, and the way the roster looks. Where do you see Alvin Gentry's place in this, in just the capabilities that he has and what he's already shown?
Well, look, the roster is going to dictate that you're supposed to play fast, right? When you have Lonzo, when you have Drew Holiday, when you have these guys who aren't necessarily going to excel in set offense, and then you have a guy like Alvin Gentry who's a mastermind at that, I think he's in the best possible situation. When you think about the fact that his jump shot is a set shot, when you think about he's best in the open floor and playing with pace, all right, cool. Lonzo Ball, just run. Drew Holiday, just run. So that way you don't have to worry about his weaknesses holding him back so soon. We won't get to analyzing Zion's weaknesses holding him back for another 2 or 3 years. We know exactly what they are. We're not going to hold him to the carpet, and he's not playing in a situation where the pressure is on him to play perfect to win. And if you're New Orleans, here's the other part of it. Chris Paul's your franchise player. It wasn't good enough. He left. Anthony Davis, franchise player. Not good enough. You don't want to put that pressure on Zion to have to replace the sins of the organization from previous decades, regimes, and players who said that New Orleans was not good enough or the franchise and organization was not good enough for him. You don't want that.
And no matter, he could reach his full potential. And if you don't build right around him, it won't be good enough. LeBron reached his full potential and had to leave because the franchise was not good enough. You've got to build it right. That's why I'm so happy Griff's there.
And we have to remember this. Griff wasn't with LeBron the first time.
No.
All right? He got a more mature LeBron. So Griff's job now is, how do I get Zion to the moment when I met LeBron? Yeah. That would be a success.
Vince, the Lakers looking to fill out their roster around LeBron, AD, and Kyle Kuzma. According to reports, they have a strong interest in D'Angelo Russell and plan to meet with him face-to-face when free agency begins. Vince, what are your thoughts on a Russell-Lakers reunion?
I would say if you're D'Angelo Russell, like, what better place is there to go than L.A.? Like, if you want to sort of change the tone on your career as far as what people think of you in that way. He's left with a bad taste in his mouth, but then you got to think about it. He went to Ohio State. LeBron is a big Ohio State basketball supporter. He has a relationship with a lot of those guys. I'm sure they cross paths in a lot of different ways there with the Nike connections and everything. So I'm sure he won't have a problem playing with LeBron and being sort of a younger brother type in that way, just because it'll change the narrative on his career. And I think he did a really good job of that this year in Brooklyn, where although it's in New York, you still don't have to play with the specter of like playing for the Knicks. And he was able to thrive in that situation and being a guy who could really help and propel that team to the playoffs. I'm not sure it makes them a title contender or anything like that, but I think if you're talking about D'Angelo Russell with his max or Kemba Walker with his max, I think you're talking about maybe two comparable type of players maybe at this stage of their careers.
When some of the people question his overall maturity, Vince, would you say this would be the most mature decision as far as going back to the Lakers and being able to face that as far as a narrative, him moving forward?
I don't know if it would necessarily be the most mature decision. I won't say it'll be an immature decision. I think you go wherever, A, the money is best and the situation is best. If that's in Memphis, if that's in Utah, you go there. It doesn't matter. Like going to L.A. to face those demons or whatever the case may be, that's a decision for us to sort of make fun of or talk about. It's good fodder. But for his career, I don't know if necessarily that's the best thing.
I'm going to say it's not the easiest decision. If I have one regret in sports, it's that I couldn't accomplish what I did in Minnesota in Philadelphia. I tell people all the time, Vikings fans have trepidation, nothing against the Vikings. But if you can go to one team, build your career, and have long-term success, you would do it in one place. And I know D'Angelo, he would like to be able to go back there. And you can't right the wrongs, but going back there in the organizations in a different position, the type of leadership they have on the team is totally different. The coaching's different. The front office totally different. So for me, at his max compared to Kemba and Kyrie's max, I think it's a great option. I woke up this morning not thinking that he could be the fourth piece, because I know from an offensive standpoint, you have LeBron at the point, D. Russell at the 2, Kuzma at the 3.
And AD is your big.
AD as the big, the 4 or the 5. You're going to be tough to stop.
Well, you said something really interesting almost in passing there, which is, would adding him make them a title contender? I don't know about that. Do you not think the Lakers, as presently constituted right now, are title contenders?
Do you have to tell me how they're filling out their roster with Rob Pelinka?
Yeah, so let's assume he does a slightly below league average job at it. So by that I mean, let's just assume, for the sake of argument, they don't get a superstar and they don't get D'Angelo Russell. They had 3 players, one of whom you like a lot. They had Terrence Ross, one of whom you scratch your head a little bit on. I don't know who that would be, but a guy that you think's not a good fit. And they just do an average job of filling out the roster. Where the NBA is going in next year, with the Warriors in total disarray, the Rockets, you reported, in total disarray, with we don't know where Kawhi Leonard's going to go, you don't think LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kuzma, and call it average roster construction from there on out is already a title contender?
How much faith do you have that it's going to be average roster construction? What has Rob Pelinka shown you besides being gifted Anthony Davis, besides being gifted LeBron James? They didn't come there because of Rob Pelinka. Well, that wasn't shrewd decision making by the Laker front office. That was the Laker brand basically saying, "Hey, we're in LA. We're the team. We're the marquee franchise in this league. That's why you're going to get Anthony Davis and LeBron."
All right, so I disagree with you partially on the Anthony Davis part, because I understand the narrative right now is the Lakers just drastically overpaid for Anthony Davis. I don't know that you can overpay for a 26-year-old potential league MVP. But here's what the Lakers kept in the Anthony Davis deal. They now have a first-round pick in 3 of the next 4 drafts. I understand people are talking about what could happen in 2025, but in 3 of the next 4 drafts, they have a first-round pick. They kept their most productive young player, and they avoided what Atlanta had to do last night, which is taking on Solomon Hill's contract, and they might still very well have max cap space if they can work out a trade with Atlanta to make this a 3-team deal. So I don't think Rob Pelinka did terribly in that trade, and he got something done the previous regime was unable to do, of which he, of course, is a part in dealing with it at the deadline. Now, to answer your question directly about D'Angelo Russell, I do think Kimba's better. I know Kyrie's better, and Kawhi's on a different plane than all of them. But if you're going to miss on all 3 of those guys, I think their best option would be Terrence Ross, Darren Collis, and Patrick Beverley, something like that.
Right.
But because I am not certain Rob Pelinka would be able to land all 3 of those guys, and because we talked earlier, there's going to be teams with a lot of cap space left over, and guys are going to start getting overpaid. I don't think D'Angelo Russell would be a bad option at all. And a top 4 of LeBron, AD, D'Angelo Russell, Kyle Kuzma, plus Kyle Korver is going to come play there for the minimum. JR is going to get bought out in the next week. He might come play there very cheaply. You're going to be able to fill out the rest of your roster otherwise. I think that is not only a contender, I think that is the title favorite.
Well, and just from you talk about roster construction, what we saw out of Pelinka last year, and we'll see what the Nets do. I mean, still a restricted free agent, but for D'Angelo Russell, what does he bring? He can play make. He can play off the ball. He can play on the ball. What does LeBron need to be surrounded by? Shooters. He can shoot the basketball. He understands how to keep a floor balance and spread. He can push tempo. There's a lot of facets to his game, how he plays, that fits very well in with these guys. And I also think, and you said he started to change the narrative of the type of person he is, teammate he is. I know it's not L.A. I was around it every single day. I believe that narrative has been changed. He was beloved by his coaches. He was beloved by his teammates. He was beloved by the fans. I think he has matured in a big way, of which there was a difference of the first year when we went back to Los Angeles and he played the Lakers, and this past season. I think he's grown a lot, and that's a big factor, and I think which would make it easier for him if, in fact, that was a place that he returned to.
A couple of things I saw, too, because knowing him from Ohio State, you can see the maturity, but I watched him, and I watched him more when he was on the bench. And you could see he had genuine enthusiasm for the other guys when they had success on the court. Now, a tangible thing on the court. Him and one other player had 900 pick and rolls last year. Just imagine him and AD, him and LeBron in a pick and roll. He got 900 examples of it last year from a basketball standpoint of why he would be successful there in the Lakers.
And I think about it like this. I know we tend to remember how it ended in L.A. and how he had to rehabilitate his image, but I'll go back to guys' beginnings. As a number 2 pick, the same things people were saying about Lonzo Ball coming into L.A., your number's going to be in the rafters. You're a perfect fit for the Lakers. You look at D'Angelo's skill set at Ohio State, a skilled passer, a guy who could shoot, a guy who could play make. He doesn't get to the basket as much, but in this league, I don't know how valuable that is. Now, if you can do those 2 things, he's still a pedigreed, talented guy who would fit into any particular situation.
23 years old.
He's really young, and sometimes people were talking about kids last night in the draft, judging them when you're 19 and you're 20, and you're putting millions of dollars in your pocket and expecting them not to have sort of pitfalls. Guys get a chance to grow and make mistakes and come back from that, and I'm not a fan of judging guys.
And the guy he had the falling out with isn't exactly the most mature guy in the league himself. It was a swaggy P. Iggy Azalea situation, wasn't it? I don't know if he had the greatest leadership in that locker room to begin with. Just my 2 cents on that. Sorry, Swaggy.
And now it's time for your AT&T wake-up call. Zion Williamson was selected first overall by the Pelicans. David Griffin was clear, saying he's not the savior of the franchise. But, Nick, will Zion be the Pelicans' savior?
I don't think the Pelicans franchise needs saving. I think they need an infusion of talent like this, but they were in the second round 2 years ago. This is not a moribund, sad sack franchise that just can't get out of its own way. We have those in the NBA. I don't think the Pelicans are one of them. I think they have an above-average coach. I think they have an excellent GM. Their overall talent before they got Zion should have been enough to be a 30-ish win team, but what he will be is a savior for the fan base when it comes to excitement after the emotional devastation of losing Anthony Davis.
There's a number of things that the Pelicans needed. They needed a credible general manager like David Griffin to be able to run it. They needed someone to put together an Anthony Davis trade to get him out of that locker room so that they can build around Drew Holiday and the rest of that roster. They got a couple NBA starters in the trade, and now they have one of the brightest guys that we've seen. And we believe that I believe that the coach is a little underrated. I do believe that he will fit the style for which Zion needs to play because he will challenge Zion to play defense. And Zion doesn't need that.
Right.
But that's the way you start your NBA career. Get out on the break, playing some defense. The other skills will come with that. So I think he's in a great spot.
Moving on to the number 2 overall pick, Ja Morant was selected second by the Grizzlies. He will be the man in Memphis after they traded Mike Conley. So, see, what do you expect from Ja as a pro?
I expect him to be very, very exciting basketball player. I worry about his overall health. He's a small guy, and when you play the style that he does, you're going to be a high flyer. You end up on the ground a lot. So I want to watch how his body improves. Watch the pressure that they put on him. But he has, to me, the style that transfers over to the NBA. Wide open. He's a great passer, the best passer that we had in this year's draft. So those skills, I believe, transfer immediately. I'm just concerned about the amount of minutes he's going to play as a young player and the pressure.
A lot of pressure taken over from Mike Conley.
Yes.
He and Mark Gasol, 2 best players in Grizzlies franchise history, and really defined that era of Grizzlies basketball. He is an excellent three-point shooter on the right side of the court, over 40%, and he's an excellent deep three-point shooter, a la Damian Lillard, a guy that will pull up from far, which is an important skill in today's NBA. We know he can pass. We know he can fly. He's the number 1 pick in 40% of the last 20 NBA drafts. He's just not the number 1 pick because of Zion. To me, he is the other, no doubt, can't-miss guy in this draft. Grizzlies are thrilled.
Finally, let's talk Kevin Durant. He's still trying to figure out what he is doing next season. According to reports, the Warriors are considering offering KD a delayed sign-and-trade option, which would keep him in the Bay Area while he rehabs. Nick, does this make sense for Kevin?
I don't understand this at all. It makes sense for the Warriors because the Warriors have Steph at $40 million. Clay's about to be at 30 plus. Draymond and Iggy combined for 35. There's your whole salary cap. And when Iggy retires, assuming you keep Draymond, he's going to want 30. There's your whole salary cap once again. So what doing this for the Warriors would allow is you get something back for Kevin Durant. You can go over the cap to keep your own guys, and you can go over the cap if you are already over the cap, and you trade a player to bring guys back. So for Golden State, it allows them to not be a team that has 3 guys making all the money where they can't compete at the level they want to. If you're Kevin Durant, first of all, why would you want to rehab there? You can talk much more about that than I can. And second of all, this is an enormous amount of trust that, okay, yeah, I'm going to sign a 5-year contract with you and just trust you're going to send me where you say where I want to go, when I want to go there. I mean, there's Aaron Baines, it was reported, opted into his contract with a commitment from Danny Ainge, we're not going to trade you. And and then when Al Horford left, Danny Ainge told him, all right, again, according to the Boston Globe, we might trade you, but it'll only be to a contender. The next day, he got traded to the Suns. So listen, you trust these teams at your own peril. If Kevin Durant wants to play for New York, he should just go sign in New York. I understand the Knicks can't offer him the 5th year, and the Warriors can offer him a little bit more money per year. That, to me, would not be worth the risk. Not even to mention, if you do this, whatever team you go to is weakened because they have to give up assets to get you. For all these reasons, it might make sense for Golden State, C. To me, it makes no sense for Kevin Durant.
To me, this is the Hail Mary for Golden State. It's the way that you can keep the dream alive. It's the way that you sold all those personal licensing, all that new stadium, all that revenue, all those season ticket holders that you got looped in long term to be at that new arena. Oh, there's hope. And you know what they're going to say next? Oh, he might come back for the playoffs. Oh, it's unfinished business. Yeah, this is the owner that during the conference final said that Kevin Durant would be on the court in the final. Now, I know he's not a doctor, and him being rich don't make him a doctor. So for me, it would be hard to extend that type of trust and faith over money that I could make off the court in New York. Kevin Durant, I'm sure, had a number of deals lined up that when he signs on July 1st with the Knicks, there were a number of companies that immediately just popped out of nowhere that were getting ready to partner with him. And I'm sure that money exceeds that extra 5th year. So for me, and you brought out a great point yesterday, man, his doctor's in New York. So why every month I have to check up with my doctor? Why would I have to get on the airplane? Compared to being with the Knicks, which I believe he is, or with the Nets, where their team doctor is the one that took care of him with his foot surgery and took care of this Achilles rupture surgery. So to me, it does not make sense, and it's not in Kevin Durant's best interest to sign back up, because let's just imagine this. If he does sign that deal, in about 10 months, what kind of pressure is Kevin Durant as a competitor going to put on himself to be on that basketball court?
Again, same thing.
It's worse this time because now you've ruptured it, and if you ruptured it once, it can definitely be ruptured again, Sarah.
How much, which all of these are excellent points, I think the biggest thing is the depleted roster that you would be going to, which makes it really, there's a lack of any understanding because you would be going to a weakened team. But Nick.
And that was just real quick before you move on from that point. That was the criticism Carmelo dealt with. Remember, Carmelo, everyone said just wait a year and you can go to New York and then keep their players.
Yep.
But Melo wanted the max from Denver, wanted all of it.
Yep.
And what ended up happening was the Knicks trade away Gallinari picks. They trade away guys that could have helped Carmelo compete here in New York. And that's one of the reasons that Carmelo era was, for a lot of people, a failed era. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that is a pretty apples-to-apples example.
But with all of that, the point about his rehab, and see, you've dealt with rehab, dealt with coming back from injuries. Now at this point, as he's looking at different teams, and even Golden State taking into account of that, how much of his decision for where he wants to be for the next 4 years, 5 years, factors in to what that performance staff is like, what the medical staff is like, and how much trust he has in that as opposed to maybe what team or what roster that he wants to fit in with.
Kevin Durant said it's always been, since he signed with the Warriors, it's been the Warriors and Kevin Durant. What do you think? You think this injury is going to bring them together? Like, he's not going to get on the basketball court with them ever again. So just imagine Kevin Durant in his overall rehab in the pool that it would have on the younger players on the roster. RJ just got drafted by the Knicks. Imagine him watching Kevin Durant. Imagine Kevin Durant giving him tidbits as he grows in his rookie year. So there's still, for Kevin Durant, no matter where he is, say Brooklyn, with the team that they have. Imagine that team trying to get to 45 wins potentially that we might be able to get him. Imagine how that team would feel. So whatever his future is going to be, he's better off going there now because it's only going to help the team because there's nothing from a compensation, and I don't believe anything gets the Warriors, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson, his overall rehab is going to be viewed totally different because he is a Warrior. And Kevin Durant, even though it was a warrior act, him trying to get back out there with his teammates, he will never be painted in the same with the same.
What did he say himself? It's always been the Warriors and Kevin Durant. Why he'd want to be there almost as a lame duck player in this scenario. If he wants to stay a Warrior forever, God bless, then sign the 5-year deal to be a Warrior forever, fine. But this, to me, would be ridiculous on his end. And last point on this, I also don't know that 5th year is a huge carrot for KD. Because of his age, I think I could make, and if I were his agent, if I were Rich Kleiman, I would be making the argument, financially, signing a 4-year deal with an option after the 3rd year sets you up more in your mid-30s to get one more max deal as opposed to a 5-year deal when someone where even if you have opt-out after 4.
I haven't even looked at that.
You're a year older, and now you're 35-year-old
And
Kevin
we know
Durant.
he's a gym rat.
Right. You're a 35-year-old Kevin Durant asking for a 4 or 5-year deal as opposed to a 34-year-old Kevin Durant asking for a 4 or 5-year deal on your last deal. So I don't even think that extra year is that important because I don't think Kevin Durant looks at this as his last contract. I think he looks at this as his second to last major contract, and the earlier you can get to that next one, even if it's in the exact same city, financially could be better for you.
Coach. Let's talk Patrick
That's
Mahomes.
my kind of vacation.
Man, aren't you supposed to go to a polo game this weekend? Don't be shaming people going to Utah.
Hey, man, you get to reading my messages out loud, I'm going to pop you. You know I'll put a mark on you.
Mahomes won the MVP last season, throwing for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. He's favored to repeat this season ahead of Carson Wentz, Andrew Luck, Tom Brady, and Aaron Rodgers. Coach, do you expect Mahomes to repeat his success from last year's MVP season?
I am shocked that I'm here talking about Patrick Mahomes with Nick. That's so surprising. To me, this is, I am really excited to see what he does this year. And last year, he had a fantastic season. The numbers were staggering. But this year is going to be a totally different situation. The Tyreek Hill issue isn't resolved, and there's 12 touchdowns. Kareem Hunt, there's no more Kareem Hunt. There's another, 14 touchdowns? So there's 26 offensive touchdowns that are potentially no longer in the building that you've got to somehow compensate for. And then defensively, they made big changes defensively. They're hoping they're going to make some progress, but you move on from Dee Ford and Justin Houston, and I understand they had some additions and they like where they're headed, but that could be another part of this problem that he's going to have to overcome, or another challenge he's going to have to overcome. To me, is he truly a force multiplier is what we're going to be able to find out this year, because now it's really only Travis Kelce as opposed to the 3 that he had his first season.
I think it's a little unfair to question if he's a force multiplier. Now, to question whether or not he can duplicate what he did last season, totally fair. And I would argue the Chiefs don't want him to duplicate what he did last season. There's a reason why the 12 highest scoring offenses in NFL history all have one thing in common. None of them won the Super Bowl. It's usually because yes, you need tremendous talent and ability to be on that list, but it's also sometimes out of necessity. It's because late in games you're not grinding out the clock. It's late in games you're trying to mount a comeback so you can win 45-41 instead of losing 41-38. The Chiefs did move on from Dee Ford and Justin Houston. They brought in Frank Clark and Tyrann Mathieu, and they think, I don't know if they're right, they think the defense will be better. They went to Steve Spagnuolo as a defensive coordinator. They think the defense will be better. But the point on the question about Tyreek Hill, and the reason there's a question about Tyreek Hill is horrifying, and we've talked about that a lot. But on the football field, that just from the on-the-field standpoint, he was the most important player on the team, not named Patrick Mahomes. He was the guy that every defense had to account for first, second, and last. When Kareem Hunt ended up being cut by the Chiefs, I told you, I still thought the offense could continue to tick along. And I said I would feel very differently, because you asked me, you said, well, could they lose anyone you'd be worried? I said, yes, Tyreek Hill. And so whether I think he's going to be on the roster, but even if he is, he's almost assuredly going to be facing some type of suspension. That, to me, is going to be the biggest challenge for Mahomes, from going from almost an embarrassment of riches weapons-wise to a great tight end and a good but oft-injured Sammy Watkins, and then other guys that are around replacement level. What does Patrick Mahomes do with that? That is really interesting to me.
Right. There was something about Kansas City offense that I was totally wrong about, and that was Tyreek Hill. I didn't think at this stage of his career he could be a number 1 receiver. We had never seen a number 1 receiver with his skill set transition to being a wide receiver that quick. We saw Steve Smith. He started as a punt returner, kickoff specialist, and then he became a number 1 receiver, ultimately building his career where one day he should be in Canton in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So I was wrong about Tyreek Hill. Where do they replace that productivity? Because he will miss time. That's a guarantee. They haven't announced it yet, but that's a guarantee for the season. Last year, the Kansas City Chiefs, it's a matter of in those historic offenses, in that year after they had that, and I was on one of those offenses, it's how you're going to move the mail. Because you can't do it the same way, because every team is trying to duplicate what you did or stop what you did. Last year, they had 208 passes. Patrick Mahomes over 10 yards. The ball traveled down the field. So Patty Mahomes was special at a number of things. But to me, throwing the ball and throwing it deep down the field, that was his specialty. Tyreek Hill, he was a receiver of 75 of those. Where does that productivity come from in a once every generational type talent? He had 75 attempts. Travis Kelce had 56 of those attempts. And this is where the problem comes. Not with the 75 and the 56, but the next player, Chris Conley, only had 15. So where do they change who is the target? How do they get this productivity? Because they will not have the number of touchdowns they had last season. Man, defenses will change, and I believe what they'll keep doing is they're going to blitz Patty Mahomes. They're going to put pressure on him, and what he's going to see this year, people are going to start doing like Brett Favre, guy they like to compare him to him. They're going to blitz him off his right side. Don't blitz him off his left and force him to his right. Watch the highlights. Watch how many highlights come with Patty Mahomes moving to his right, just carving up the defense. So I'm going to start blitzing him off his right. I'm going to force him to his left. So then when he throws the ball, I can get closer to him. So those are adjustments he's going to have to make, Coach.
And I'm really interested to see how he deals with expectations. And expectations are tough. And when you saw him in the playoffs, and he had a good playoff run, but he was sacked 8 times. He was only sacked 26 times during the course of the whole season. He sacked 8 times in 2 games because he's trying to make plays. Is that how he's going to go into this season, where he's constantly trying to make plays, trying to press the ball downfield, making decisions because he's so confident with his arm that he shouldn't make and putting the team in difficult spots? Or is he going to be able to take a step back and say, okay, this isn't a decision I should be making?
In the playoffs, it should be noted, I think one of the reasons he was sacked 8 times was because he was not going to take risks with the football. 0 giveaways in those 2 playoff games where...
But you can also throw the ball out of bounds.
You can't throw the ball.
That's allowed.
Absolutely. But there's an element of with Mahomes, it is prove it, and once you prove it, prove something else. Not throwing the ball, not turning the ball over in the playoffs, executing that amazing comeback in the second half against New England that your defense couldn't hold on to. All those things are super relevant going into
all the things that franchise quarterbacks have to prove, and they never get beyond it. Can you handle the success? At every level, it's always, can they handle the success? Peyton, Brady goes through it every year. Aaron Rodgers, how does he handle it? At all the big events, Patty Mahomes was at, Final Four, big games. He was all around America, man, enjoying his offseason. How does that translate into season number 3?
Coach, thanks for being here with us today and this week.
See you guys.
We've enjoyed it. Moving on.
All right, let's get on your hair, but I'm going to wait.
Good. That's why I started talking about that. That's why I started talking about the passed away relatives. Now you can't.
Maybe 3 minutes.
Yeah. Kyrie Irving seems to have his bags packed out of Boston. The question is where he goes next. While Brooklyn seemed to be the favorite, reports are the Nets are questioning signing Kyrie if they can't also land Kevin Durant. Vince, are teams right to have doubts about Kyrie's future after his failures in Boston?
You would be foolish not to have questions about what you have to surround a guy like Kyrie Irving with if you're going to bring him into your program. Now, I talked about it a little bit with the other day with the Celtics. I don't think the Celtics have the right infrastructure, the right support for him in terms of coaching staff, in terms of the front office, people he could relate to, people he could talk to, people he could learn from. If you're Brooklyn, you have to make sure you have that independent of Kevin Durant, independent of anything else that you bring into your locker room. You have to make sure you have the infrastructure, because Kyrie, although he has a lot of NBA experience, he's still learning a lot. And his effect, his personality from a day-to-day basis on a young, impressionable team. We saw how that happened in Boston. I think he caught too much of the criticism, but some of the criticism was warranted as far as how his personality had a negative effect on some of those young players. You have to be very careful about that. He cannot be the most dominant personality in your locker room. Maybe your best player, but not your most dominant personality. I think there's a difference between the two.
I would have enormous trepidation about this, but it wouldn't prevent me from bringing him in. First of all, there's 10 teams that have max cap space. There's really only, at most, 6 guys that are true max players that you would do without any anxiety are they going to live up to it, and he's one of those 6. So there are going to be guys, when we're talking about Nikola Vucevic maybe getting a max deal, of course Kyrie Irving should get a max deal.
Vucevic, now what tier is he? Because these guys, you can't have everyone on the same level,
right, so
even though they're free agents.
To me, KD, Kawhi, Kyrie, and Kimba are that top tier, and even within that tier there's a tier, but let's just call them all that top tier. Then Jimmy Butler, D'Angelo Russell, Tobias Harris are that next tier, and you could say there's tiers within that. And then you get to Chris Middleton, Vucevic, Al Horford, that tier right there. I don't know where Boogie Cousins falls into any of this because I don't think he's going to get a max contract. But the point is, I just mentioned 10 names. There's 10 teams. A few of them have double max cap space. So if you can get Kyrie Irving, and I don't think the Nets would turn Kyrie Irving down. I don't think they would feel as great about it as if Kawhi Leonard said, hey, I want to come here, and that's understandable. But I also don't think we should shut the door to Kyrie Irving evolving, to Kyrie Irving learning from failure. Last year was the first real failure of Kyrie Irving's career, I would argue. Those first few years in Cleveland before LeBron got there, he didn't fail. No. The team got a little bit better each year. You can argue maybe they underachieved somewhat, but they didn't have great players. They spent first overall pick on Anthony Bennett. Like, that's it.
He was able to display his ability that people knew. He is rare as far as dribbling, finishing at the rim, an elite scorer. So he actually earned some credibility in the NBA, on the NBA streets.
And so he learned, there's that phase, then there's phase with LeBron, then there's the Celtics phase. We don't know what would have happened in that first year when the Cavs were LeBron and injured Kevin Love and Jeff Green, but Kyrie got hurt and Gordon Hayward obviously was out all year. And then last year was a disaster. It was a disaster on all accounts, and Kyrie clearly needs something of a fresh start. I don't want to act like I think it's impossible that he has the ability to be introspective and say, okay, how much of it was on me? How much of it was my leadership style didn't resonate with the young people? How much of it was my focus on the playoffs starting in February put too much pressure on me when the playoffs started and not enough focus on getting as high in the standings as we could have? Maybe avoiding the Milwaukee in round 2 if we had focused more in the regular season. All those things. And then there is, to me, the toughest question Kyrie Irving has to ask himself, which is, how important is it to me to reach my overall highest potential as a basketball player for the longest period of time? Because if that is the most important thing to him, then there are some things off the court he needs to get better at. There are some things off the court he might need to cut out of his life to stay healthier. And those are things certain teams around the league have concerns about. He's not the only NBA superstar people have concerns about them with, but you don't have that concern with Kawhi. You don't have that concern with KD. I've never heard that concern with Kemba Walker. So Kyrie's the only one in that first tier where you're like, what would it be? So those are all legitimate questions. But if you're the Nets, of course, if you can sign him, you sign him, at least in my mind.
And his free agency is definitely got more difficult since Kevin Durant got hurt. Because I know the Nets, they got 2 spots available. If Kevin Durant said, I want to beat Kyrie with me, they're going to be like, no problem. Both of you can come. I know the Knicks would take him under that circumstance. But if you don't have KD, it seems like everyone's still wondering, is Kyrie better being a little brother compared to being a big brother? We saw in Boston this year. And this is what I'll say as far as you giving him benefit of the doubt as far as going into the future. Not signing with Boston is a sign that he's not going to make another mistake. Because he could get more money from Boston, go back there into a situation that he is not going to flourish. So at least good decision making starts with one decision. So we got to be able to give him credit. He should be able to learn through the wealth of knowledge he's been exposed to, what type of organization he wants to be with, style of play, and teammates. And this time, there's no excuse. He's not being traded. He's actually picking the team, so I expect him to continue to mature and be better in this decision-making than the situation he was put in when he forced his way out of Cleveland.
Well, and how much you factor in there was probably things he would take responsibility for last season, but even throughout the course of the year coming out and saying, you know what, I called LeBron and said, I didn't realize how hard this was. I thought I wanted my own team. I thought I wanted to run my own team. And I realized there were some nuances that maybe I didn't understand. As he moves forward and wherever he chooses to go, what do you think for him is the best fit of those around him? Does he need another player to be able to help him out with that type of leadership?
Absolutely. And I think his personality is no different than many other superstars' personalities we've had in the league. We just know more. We just have more access to the moods. And Kyrie is more intimate with and letting us know that, hey, I don't like the way things are going. Sometimes guys can be too honest to some degree, and they let us in. True. They let us in behind the curtain. And when Kyrie said, hey, we're not taking this seriously enough, everybody said, well, Kyrie, you shouldn't say that. But then you look at it and say, well, Kyrie was exactly correct. The problem was that he said it and that we're not used to hearing that level of honesty. Kevin Durant is sort of the same way, which is why I think those two guys connect and bond, because they're so similar. Here's the other thing about this, and let's be honest. When people fail with the Boston Celtics, we look at it as it's a problem with you, not the problem with the organization, because the Celtics have a certain amount of credibility with the public because of Danny Ainge, because of Brad Stevens and everything else. Kyrie should take a share of the blame, not all of it. And I think when you move forward, we're going to see that Kyrie has his flaws, but he's not this player who, like, let's be honest, there's only but so many types of talent like this in the league.
Right.
You're not going to pass that up.
He's
Let's
not a
be honest.
cancerous player. And one last very quick note. I think the Nets would sign him if it was just him. I also think Kyrie, he's got rabbit ears to a degree. If this report is erroneous, the Nets need to back channel to Kyrie's new representation at Rock Nation and tell him that. Because Kyrie, I wouldn't put it past Kyrie to hear something like this and be like, oh, y'all don't want me? Dallas will want me. We know the Lakers want him. So the Nets, I think, they can't publicly because it'd be tampering right now. But they got to make it clear to Kyrie's people, if they do want him, which I think they do, don't listen to the noise here.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.